many people in this room know that they live in what's called a stepping up county? Anyone know that, familiar with that? Great, lots of hands. I do want to draw attention to my colleague, Commissioner Clara Hall from Lincoln County. When she served as the Association of Oregon president, that was her platform for the year. Very important work in the Stepping Up initiative around keeping those with mental health issues out of the correction system. And the reason why I draw your attention to that is it leads really nicely into the next presentation on the Yellow Line project, which also looks at the nexus between law enforcement and those with mental health and acute chemical health issues. So please help me in welcoming the representatives of the Yellow Line project.
Thank you all for welcoming us here. We're glad to be here from Minnesota. I'll have a few comments about the differences between our state here in just a moment. Formal thank you to the Criminal Justice Commission for inviting us, Commissioner. Appreciate that very much. And then thank you to each one of you to listen to our story. You know, when you have a story, you push yourself out there into kind of the dark space, the undefined space. You don't know exactly how that's going to go. And so thanks for listening to that. I hope there's some application to your work and the good work that you do. We do have a 2:45 breakout session, so we will drill down if you're interested in more of the details or want to get into more of a dialogue, so we're excited about that as well. I just want to start by introducing our team quickly. Starting over here, Ricky Pribble. She is a clinical director of Horizon Homes, and her staff really allow us to be 24/7 as far as mobile response and social services to support law enforcement. Next to her is Captain Paul Barta from our Blue Earth County Sheriff's Office. And then Matt Rose is commander for the Mankato Public Safety Department. And finally, my colleague in Human Services, Angie Youngerberg, who is our Director of Business Operations. My name is Phil Clausen, and I'm a psychobabalist by trade, so you'll hear all these different disciplines kind of coming together, and I'm the Director of Human Services for Blue Earth County. Let's see if I can get some slides up here. Yep. So here's our logos, and if you want to contact any one of us up here afterwards, our information is in the back of the slides. This is my comments on Minnesota. We are really, this group of us, gotten to know each other well over the last really 4 years, and I describe us as a band of brothers and sisters just coming together to try to do something to help really what we've heard about already from the governor and from the presenter on keynote, just on trying to get upstream. That's what we're trying to do. You'll see some of our demographics. Where we come from, Blue Earth County in Minnesota, population a little over 67,000. Major city is Mankato. Once you get outside of Mankato in our county, it's rural, it's farming. We do have one university and 2 colleges in town, and we're about an hour and a half to the Twin Cities. Our best guess here by looking was we might compare somewhat similar to Benton County in Oregon. It's very true that the winters in Minnesota are nasty and cold. That's a truth. And this year has been full of snow and ice, and I am telling you folks, it was like a daily thing here in the last couple weeks. And so I'm very proud of the work we do, but our staff have an extra dose of toughness. And before I left, I was able to snap this picture of one of our social workers getting to work is what this is. So you'll see. They're a very dedicated lot. Yeah. So here it is. If I could pick one thing to get into your heads and see how it resonates, one key mantra that I'd like to appeal to you to think about is this. Changing our choices, and that we get to do that in our leadership roles. That's what we've done in a nutshell. If you describe the work we've done together, we've changed our choices. We didn't like our choices. We thought the menu was too small, and we did something about it. And we've really received a ton of support in sticking our necks out. And so I hope it plays well for you all, and again, that you can put that side by side with your realities and what you're up against. I think it's safe to assume that all of us are here for that same purpose, is, we signed on to do something unique or something that mattered, and I think the work we do is really important. But this work that we've done here in this project has been pretty satisfying. So I challenge you and encourage you to say, take a risk as you think about some of what we've done over time. Next slide here, getting into some of the detail. Our presenting problems then, when we examined our reality and decided that we did want to change our choices, we looked at our jail situation as primary, and the related issues there are untreated and undertreated mental illness, chemical dependency. I'm sure these will be familiar to you. Use of incarceration in place of treatment, and overcrowding in the jail itself that caused us to look, like the governor talked about, to build more building, and we did not have to do that at this point, so we're happy about that. Skyrocketing use of competency evaluations in the defense process. I think you as a state have invested deeply in some of those difficulties and asking questions about what the future might hold. Difficulty in accessing hospital and residential resources, overuse of detox, and then probably our biggest thing relationally was just building better bridges between law enforcement, social services, so the discipline I represent, alongside those and our mobile crisis provider, our private providers in our city and in our county. What we said we would do, the next slide is we were bold enough to go to the Department of Human Services in Minnesota and say that we could deliver on these several items. A new model of upstream diversion and deflection for that mental illness and chemical dependent populations. We would design something that's replicable and scalable, that we would look at financial sustainability and investment both at startup and on an ongoing basis, and then just share our learnings. And I can say that, this is part of that, so again, thank you very much for our ability to share, but also multi-counties in Minnesota are now replicating at least some form of the yellow line. The change dynamic, this is important to me. I'm kind of the design guy, and I was really involved early on in this process of what are we going to do. And the first part of this whole change dynamic in really 3 levels was the community leadership piece and buy-in from the community leaders. You'll see on the slide just a number of folks that are represented here in this room. It's a very impressive room, by the way. We've been awed by you all coming together and having this kind of passion for the mission. But that crosses over a bunch of disciplines. We all represent a lot of different parts of what the work that we do. The next layer in is our departmental culture shifts. And in the breakout, we'll talk more about this, but each of us went through some pretty dramatic changes in the way we thought about the work we did, in how we staffed, and how we trained. And so we can get into a little more detail if you're interested, or if you're either involved in a project like this one that's on the kind of upstream level of deflection, or if you're just interested in it, please come, because we're just going to talk about this common ground. And then finally, the third level of change was to really create something brand new. And for us, it was really creating a couple of positions, shifting some of our resource from our department and redefining the roles. And so we call that a community-based coordinator, which is really a intensive case manager. They do short-term goal planning, and they track progress and report back to law enforcement on that for the individuals that choose to be part of this project. It is voluntary. And then we also have screeners, and I mentioned Ricky. Ricky is the one that leads us in that, and she has 24/7 coverage to do a quick screening. It's 15 minutes max to see if folks are eligible for some type of creative alternatives. So those are the 3 big areas. We encourage you also to think about a project and how that might look for you. This is probably the best part of what I'm going to lead up here and hand off to some of my colleagues, but we did receive an award from the Humphrey Institute out of the University of Minnesota, and part of our reward was to have them come and videotape us. And as you all know, you can have 3 or 4 minutes of tape, which this is, and it took a lot of effort to get that all down. So we're going to show you the short version. If you are interested in this, we also have a longer version that was also professionally produced. It's about 10 minutes long on our website. That information is at the end of the packet as well. So please watch this, and I'll hand off to my colleague.
The Yellow Line Project is a unique collaboration between Human Services and the Sheriff's Department and local law enforcement agencies to provide an early response to individuals with chemical and mental health needs. Specifically, it diverts a person from jail or a higher level of service to needed services where they can take charge of their own life.
For us in Blue Earth County, we've tried to look at the mental health issue and the chemical health issue and try to get as far upstream as we possibly can to try to work with people before problems escalate and get worse.
Jail isn't always the appropriate place for someone. Law enforcement, we have certain choices that we can make and certain placements for people. Home, jail, detox if they're impaired, hospital if it's needed or appropriate. But those aren't necessarily always the right decisions. So for the Yellow Line Project, really offering better resources to provide a much more appropriate placement for them outside of a jail setting.
It's a life-changing situation or event if someone is physically taken into custody and put into jail. Your rights change, and also you're dealing with that on a criminal history record then, long term. If we're able to offer certain folks, especially in a time of crisis, an opportunity to not have to go down that path of a physical arrest or charge, we've really done them a service and probably helped them along the path of not having to deal with that stigma for the rest of their life.
What's in scope for this project is lower level offenses, non-victim crimes, and individuals that are not an immediate threat to themselves or harm to public safety. The screener asks them questions about their mental health, their chemical health, their social situation, their family support, and then also asks them future questions. Where do you want to end up? And then we try to blend a plan of immediate action that can take the first steps about getting a person more on their future path versus a path into jail.
I'd never heard of the Yellow Line Project before arriving at the jail. The jail was kind of a typical scenario for me. I got drunk on a relapse. I blacked out completely. My personality changed because I have mental health issues, among them depression. Normally you would wake up in jail, find out that you're evicted, find out you've embarrassed yourself, that you've lost your friends, that you lost your job because you're going to be in jail for a while, and that your life is ruined. And so on top of the depression you had the day before, you now have a whole slew of problems that are going to take you years to resolve. That's what I was expecting, and instead I talked to Jesse Hornick at the Blue Earth County Jail. I went into treatment. I got put on a new regimen of antidepressant meds, anti-anxiety meds, and a new diagnosis, and I'm on those meds to this day.
Mark took advantage of this opportunity, and he wanted it, and he's showing that. You know, his case closed in July. He completed the goals of his Yellow Line plan, but he has maintained contact with me, you know, letting me know his success. He's been hired on at a full-time employment.
Without the Yellow Line Project, I don't think that I would have an optimistic future today at all. I'd still be, you know, wandering the maze of the legal system. It's been night and day as far as the change in my lifestyle and in my outlook.
We've had some great outcomes with this project. One of the savings that we've seen is that our hospitalization costs are down $200,000 over the projected amount. We're also seeing that our jail bed days are down over 100 bed days from last year. In addition, our detox costs are down over $100,000 this year. So the philosophy on saving money in this project is significant.
But the best part of all of this is seeing real individuals reunite with their family, decide that they are going to make a personal choice and have a plan that they're excited about. It's one thing that we feel like we're doing a good job, that's great. But when an individual feels like their life is more hopeful, that's the real payoff.
Not only is this video a fantastic representation of the project to this point, it's also a permanent reminder that one November in my life I tried to grow a mustache. And now we have a permanent record of that that will be with us forever. So, and clearly I have a yellow line tie because I was wearing this tie in the video as well that has yellow lines on it, so we know that. So the project, early on in the planning stages, we decided there were gonna have to be some core tenets. There were some things that we just had to have in order to make this project successful. Some were represented from the human services side, some from the provider side, and some from the law enforcement side that said, we need these in order to be successful. I would say that the 24/7 access was something that was needed. Paul and I, and part of the discussions was that if it's not available 24 hours a day to the cops on the street, getting in contact with these individuals, it's not gonna be used. If we have to go through a flow chart to decide if it's this, if it's 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, this is who we call and this is where we go, as opposed to a Saturday morning at 7 a.m. It had to be 24/7 access. So we worked through that. We want 100% screenings. So screenings for us mean that we bring somebody to the pre-booking in Blue Earth County Jail. Pre-booking, you would enter in a sally port. Pre-booking is kind of an area where you would go to get somebody ready to then be booked into the jail. There's a couple of holding cells out there, a couple of restrooms, and some other paperwork, things like that. And that's where these screenings would take place. We wanted to capture 100% of the screenings. Regardless of the person's eligibility to be enrolled into the project, we wanted to make sure that we could capture all the information that we possibly could within those screenings. We were finding that screenings are important to determine eligibility, but we're also finding that someone who is non-uniformed asking these questions is really eliciting a great amount of detail from people that people in uniform were not. So we were finding that people were maybe were on medication that they weren't disclosing to the law enforcement. We were finding that maybe there's children at home that are unsupervised, that this person was going to be booked into jail and not really think about the kids. So it also helped to provide better services to those that maybe had to go to jail. Maybe it was a mandatory arrest, maybe it was a warrant, something along those lines. So we wanted to capture 100% of the screenings, but they also had to be short. They had to be concise, but we're also being mindful of the fact that law enforcement was bringing the individuals to jail. They have other calls for service to handle. They have other duties and other responsibilities that need to be taken care of. So we needed to make sure that the screenings could be done in a reasonable period of time, understanding that the cops want it done in 30 seconds so they can get back out on the road and take care of the next call. It's not that easy and it's not that quick. So working over time, what may have started off as a 20 to 25 minute screening through the experience of the screeners gets down into that 10 to 15 minute range. That's something that is absolutely reasonable for our cops in Blue Earth County. They may not agree with that, but the fact is that 10 minutes of investment, 15 minutes of investment of their time in that screening is going to be worth a lot more time down the road in savings. So to have that screening, we're getting close to that screening. You'll see some figures later on. But the next core tenet was the community-based coordinator, and those are the two positions that Phil referenced, the two positions that were added to be able to provide the services. They do some screenings, but they provide the care coordination after the screenings and enrollment into the program. They put together the My Yellow Line plan with the individual. So the screening takes place. In order for someone to then be referred to the community-based coordinator, everybody has to agree to it. Your screener is going to agree to it all the time after a screening. If somebody is showing positive for mental health or chemical dependency concerns, they're going to want to refer. The individual themselves has to also agree to it, and then law enforcement has to. So there's really 3 yeah, sure, you betchas that would come out of this in Minnesota that would be able to allow somebody eligibility for enrollment into the program. Once the screening is done and the agreements are made and everybody says they're yeah, sure, you betchas, they'll set up an appointment to meet with the community-based coordinator to put together a My Yellow Line plan that would have 3 goals that would be involved in the plan. The goals are specific to the person and their situation. It's not these 3 for everybody. It's specific to the crime, specific to the concerns, really specific to that person. So that was something that was absolutely going to be a part of this. One thing that really needed to occur as well was law enforcement and mobile crisis really needed to come together in a way that we never had before. And historically, we in Mankato, we are the hub of Blue Earth County, so we have a lot of access to services, and mobile crisis has been there for a number of years for us. But the relationship and the use was really not there up until this project got underway, and we got into the building the solid relationships that we have today to be able to improve those workflows that we had. And so that was something that really needed to happen. It may not have been the original intent of the project, but as we all sat together at the table and really had that feeling out of what can we do for one another and with one another, that's something that was decided that we absolutely had to have as well. The services that are provided are the right service at the right time. Charges really don't matter. We want to be able to say services are needed. Let's link that person to the services at the time that they need it and have that follow through and that work with the community-based coordinator to be able to provide those services. And then finally, the debrief meetings is an opportunity for us, the core group of law enforcement, mobile provider, the screeners, human services. We also bring in our local hospital staff from the emergency department. Community corrections is represented, the jail is represented, and the community-based coordinators right now bring us a couple of their cases, a couple people from their caseload that we can talk through and understand what does that yellow line plan look like, what do the operations look like in getting the person to that yellow line plan, and really have a good conversation about those that are enrolled and the operations to get them to that point. It helps us understand maybe some changes that need to be made, some things that need to be ironed out, but it also brings together all the partners within the community that are working with people with mental illness and chemical dependency issues. It allows us to talk about some of the same people, sometimes in initials only, because that's how human services in the hospital works with HIPAA, whereas law enforcement will talk about names, but we can at least have an understanding of everybody's role and how we can really work better together. And that's been the primary goal and the outcome of those debrief meetings, is allowing everybody to come to that table and sit together to have those conversations.
Well, I want to build on and overlap a little bit with what Matt had talked initially, just to kind of reset and make sure everybody understands, I guess, the core options that law enforcement really has when we intervene or are called to a situation. I think law enforcement fundamentally is by and large the same, probably throughout most of the country, but our options really weren't as good as they probably could have been. Just to go back, I started working law enforcement about 20 or so years ago, and things really hadn't changed a whole lot in that time frame up until we were able to implement some of what this project is able to do. If we're brought to a scene or called to a scene, we've really got four real options of what we can do if we need to remove somebody from that situation. One is if it's a criminal offense, we can take them to jail. If there is mental illness or some self-harm indication, we've got the hospital as an option. We've got detox for the chemical dependency folks, and of course we do have the option to really not intervene or remove somebody from the situation. Those in law enforcement in this room have an understanding, though, a lot of times the best way to calm that situation or ensure that we aren't going to have additional calls for service is to remove somebody from that situation. That's going to be important. Here in just a minute, we'll talk about the next slide. When we got into the project and we started to look at what the capabilities were and what we needed to do, we had a realization that if we were going to remove somebody from a situation that was creating a problem, there was going to be this transport to a certain location. And a lot of times, in my experience, when you have an opportunity to actually remove somebody and have additional conversations with them, there's kind of a de-escalation that occurs. And by having somebody else involved in that conversation and staged at the jail, which is what we've done by by having the screeners there to meet with law enforcement when we arrive at the pre-booking area of our jail, we allow the officer and the individual some time to kind of de-escalate. It's a tense situation generally if we're involved. That drive to this facility allows a little bit of time for cooler heads to prevail. And then we've got this third party that's there that's able to have the conversation with everybody involved to figure out if maybe there's a better option than getting this person booked into jail. Different placement options, different things that we could maybe do so that they don't have to spend the night in jail and kind of start that process. We don't want charges to disappear necessarily in most of the cases. The charges are still going to remain, but we're able to, again, look at some alternate placement options for them, see if there's a better path that they could go down. This has never been just kind of a stagnant project, something that was created and pushed out and was going to kind of remain the way that it was at inception. We've evolved. We realized through our efforts that we were missing people. We were missing certain opportunities, and then we would try to kind of come up with solutions for those misses. The street level diversion or deflection is one example of that. We realized that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily be bringing someone to the pre-booking area for certain offenses, but those charges were going to still apply. There was still underlying chemical dependency issues or mental health concerns that were going to proliferate and continue this person down this cycle of reoffending. We wanted an option for law enforcement at the street level to be able to link an individual to our core coordinators in order to be able to see if we could do something to intervene in that cycle. I'll give you an example. Cops like to tell stories, and I think most of us probably can link in our minds a little bit better to an example. Recently, we had several child protection referrals that were coming across that were screened out. They didn't meet the threshold for our child protection workers or team to necessarily intervene in. It was a young mother with children, and she had a chemical abuse problem. And through mandated reporters, it was coming out through, basically, it was her kids telling folks at the school that mom had this addiction that was occurring and, kind of wanted a reprieve from that. We were really in kind of a tough spot with that because historically, if we wanted to try to intervene, our complainant or the person providing the information is a child that's in the home. Certainly, if we went forward with efforts to execute a search warrant there, that's going to create issues for the child. We're going to have to we're going to have a whole host of problems or hurdles to get over with that. With some out-of-the-box thinking, the street-level deflection or deferral, we were able to have the local officer go make contact with this young mother, have a discussion with her, let her know that there are other options available, and actually intervene in that situation and give those kids a break from what they were putting up with for quite a while. Mom was willing to turn over her drugs that she had in her possession in exchange for linkage to our community-based coordinators to be able to try to intervene in this cycle, and the kids got a break from it. That's one example of the street-level deflection. Charges don't necessarily have to apply. They can, or at the officer's discretion, they may not. The newest pathway that we've developed is the 1 to 3 day incarceration. In Minnesota, I'm sure it's pretty standard in multiple jurisdictions, including here, that certain offenses are mandated that we bring that individual to jail. We don't have officer discretion on what we can do with them. What happens, though, is because of the statutory limitations, sometimes we get put in a tough spot where we've got an individual that is certainly not going to be suited for incarceration that simply has to go there because of the circumstances and the way that the statute is written. Well, the 1 to 3 day allows us to have some linkage with the county attorney's office and the system to try to figure out if this individual can be released to be able to work with the community-based coordinator in order to try to, again, intervene in the cycle of underlying behaviors or problems that are occurring. It gives additional options to the system and to our officers and to everybody that's involved with it to break that cycle.
Okay, so we've established our workflows now, and kind of what we had to do as a service provider was say, how are we going to integrate this and rethink how we do things in our system. One of the systems was obviously mobile crisis. Our mobile crisis team before Yellow Line Project was working off of some statewide standards. Minnesota Department of Human Services came out and said, this is kind of how we want mobile crisis to work. And it helped with the implementation of mobile crisis services statewide, but it led to us as a provider kind of inadvertently boxing ourselves into a standard that didn't necessarily meet the service needs for our region. So for example, what we did was we often waited for a person who was in crisis to come to us, and doing that had kind of set them up to have escalated to the point where they maybe needed hospitalization or a higher level of care than what we could offer. And then when we did tap in and use law enforcement, there was really no loop back to service. We had a gap there. And so mobile crisis would meet, law enforcement would maybe have a brief exchange with the mobile crisis team, but then we had no warm handoff. We had nobody that we could hand this off to. So with Yellow Line Project, what we were able to do was integrate what our region's needs were, and to kind of work with what we had already had in place. And one of the things that we had in place was the screening tool. So when a person comes to us for referral for mobile crisis services, we screen them. We were already doing that. So we were providing this 10-minute screening to say, is this person really eligible for some mental health intervention? So we use that form, almost the exact same form, when we implemented Yellow Line Project, to screen people. So now we've eliminated that duplication of service. With the 24/7 establishment in our team, it helped for the Yellow Line Project because they didn't have to develop a whole nother team to respond and to work through. So our mobile crisis team is that after hours, weekends, screening provider, and then we link back to the community-based coordinator. So it allows us to respond more effectively across the board. In terms of some of the mobile crisis philosophies, ours have evolved a little bit since the Yellow Line Project. Some of the things that kind of continue to move along for us are the kind of interruption in the corrections approach with a service option. So our partnership with law enforcement has kind of allowed us to send our practitioners out, feel safe about going out and responding because they have this relationship with law enforcement. But again, that handoff is there. We utilize that handoff to make everybody's time meaningful there. So we hand off to law enforcement, or law enforcement hands off to us, and we're not wasting anybody's time, essentially. We get the services in there that are needed, and things move forward a little bit more effectively. We don't force that person to have that right kind of crisis. This was kind of a big thing for us because we were kind of missing people's definition of crisis. We want to think that we know how to handle everybody when they come through the door, but we were missing a huge population of people. And I was just kind of thinking about this. Last week I got pulled over for a headlight being out, and like my heart was like pounding out of my chest. And it totally like speaks to this. It's like, if I'm freaking out over a broken headlight being out, I can't imagine what people are going through when they're like being cited for what they know is going to be a drug charge or something more serious. So that is a crisis. And so we really had to, redefine how we looked at people and say every person's definition of crisis matters. And then the expansion of law enforcement, the menu of option, for law enforcement was really important, and we've really worked to continue to develop that as the mobile crisis team so that law enforcement has that additional option. So we can say, is there a better alternative for this person than sending them to the hospital? Or is there a better alternative for this person than letting them sit in jail for a couple of days? So we've really been able to work with law enforcement to bridge that gap and find more appropriate options for law enforcement, which has really helped the clients. Our utilization for mobile crisis has increased 377% with our involvement in Yellow Line. Excuse me. A lot of this came from law enforcement. Our referrals with law enforcement have, they've increased so much. Also, our emergency department referrals have increased. We feel like that debrief session that Matt talked about has been a huge opportunity for us to really bridge that gap and, plug ourselves into situations that are totally appropriate for us to be at the table. So screeners have this kind of dual role with mobile crisis and yellow line, but really what we're doing is we're just completing that step one process that we were already doing in providing that screening. From there, the mobile crisis team can choose to do a full mobile assessment, or we can say, you know, that's not necessarily needed, but we're still gonna hand this off to the community-based coordinator and allow them to get connected to services, get a short-term treatment plan established, and you know, help them navigate through some of their you know, issues that they're having. And again, that goes back to that value of the debrief meeting, and we've done a lot of ride-along training. So our mobile crisis team, with both Matt's team and Paul's team, we've set up ride-alongs, and our teams have gotten to know each other. Law enforcement and mobile crisis have really taken the opportunity to say, we don't want to be doing what you're doing, but we want to be aware of what you're doing so that we can complement that. So it's been a huge success for us. And then as Yellow Line project kind of continued to evolve, we have consistently worked towards these 3 goals. Our outcome measurements have slightly changed, but the goals have kind of stayed the same. So the first goal has been improved access to services. So in 2018, we had 2,450 bookings in the Blue Earth County Jail, and we provided this number for you guys to just have a comparison for, you know, your own counties that you provide services in. Out of those people, we had our screening rate was another thing that we measured, going back to those core tenets that we wanted that 100% screening. So we were able to, of the people that were booked into the Blue Earth County Jail, 94% of those people were offered a screening or had completed a screening. And then 81% of the screened individuals in 2018 reported mental health or chemical health needs. And this was different than the data that we had seen with the state of Minnesota. 30 to 50% was what was reported, but a lot of that came from jails and the Department of Corrections. Matt had kind of talked a little bit about the idea that our mobile crisis team, our screeners go in, they're in plain clothes. We do get a little bit more transparency. So we do really put value in sending our social services people in there in plain clothes to go and meet with individuals when they're in crisis and when they're in these situations, to disarm them a little bit, to be a little bit more transparent about what's really going on with them.
Okay, I am standing between here and your break, so I will go through these last slides pretty quickly. Our second goal was increased engagement for timely services. And the numbers that I'm giving you are understanding that on this previous slide, you know, we had 2,450 bookings in Blue Earth County Jail. Not everyone is eligible for the Yellow Line project. And so those that were eligible were 172 individuals that were referred to the program. They were eligible and referred. Yeah, sure, you betcha, as Matt said. 98 individuals actually engaged in that plan for services. Now, we had a lot of learnings in the very beginning that there were things that helped us increase that rate over time. So the time to first contact matters. How quickly we engage with a person matters. Don't wait. Engage with the person so that they can engage back with you matters. That if we, whoops, I went too far here. Waiting, for the engagement does not work. Doing 3 goals versus 30 goals matters. 3 goals are something that people were quickly engaging with us around, because you know what, really when they look at it, they may have a therapist that has goals for them, their probation officer may have goals for them, their spouse may have goals for them, whatever it might be. For this project, 3 clear and defined and attainable goals so that we can feel good about the work that they're doing, or they can feel good about the work they're doing matters. And then dealing with individuals that are really on that acute side. So for us, you know, an example of that would be the college age population, first time offender, and then the chronic population, those that we see back once a month, once every couple months, they're not treated the same. So their goals look very different. And so those learnings were key in terms of increasing the engagement in services. So of those 98 individuals, we had an 81% success rate. So 80 of the individuals successfully completed their plan with that community-based coordinator. That was so significant as we looked at it. And what happens to those 80 individuals? We tracked them, and 2.5% had contact with the Yellow Line Project, and really the scope of within Blue Earth County and Mankato within 3 months. 6.25% had contact within 6 months, and 8.75% had contact within 12 months. Now, some might say, well, are these your recidivism rates? Sure, they kind of look like it, but it's not that. What we don't have is access beyond our data and beyond our scope of information. And we also didn't have a project that we could compare to. So is this successful compared to what? We don't have another project like us in the nation. We are developing that within Minnesota, so we will have some comparative data from county to county very soon. But here's what I know. The homeless vet that was coming to the jail every 3 months for the last 10 years has not been back since we've been working with him. I know where he goes. He comes into our offices for services. He connects with Ricky's team for services, but he's not being seen by law enforcement anymore. And we have more and more of those stories, and so that's right now we're at the early stages of our project, and that's what we have to point to in terms of the success. We are continuing to work on data. We're continuing to work on many, many things. What we know with this project, or what people often say, is you make Yellow Line Project look so easy. I'm here to tell you then that's good. That's good. We've done our jobs, and we hope to inspire the motivation for you to dream about new solutions. But I'm going to tell you a secret. With this, we've grown together. We've succeeded together. But this video that I'm going to show you, it's a couple seconds long, is the best illustration of our cooperative efforts at certain times. We fail together.
Good?
All right.
Move the kids into the office. Listen. Hey, Izzy, go. Izzy, Bob.
Wait for it.
You're fine. Didn't you tell them they were going to?
Yeah, that happens. That happens. Phil said it. We are like brothers and sisters up here. There are times that we hit heads. We absolutely do. We fail together in times. We succeed a lot, but we do fail together. And so as leaders, we're really called upon that we must not fear that failure. We must embrace the change that it leads to. Very quickly, and we will be talking more about this financial sustainability in the breakout session, so I'm going to go through this very, very quickly. One-time planning grant that the state gave us, Phil talked about that. We have spent a significant amount of time with our legislators, and in 2017, there was a directive by the legislature to amend the Minnesota State Medicaid plan to include what's called officer-involved community-based care coordination. It was developed by us within the Yellow Line Project about working with individuals with care coordination for up to 60 days after their referral to our service. So we will be paid by Medicaid. So we are within months of all of that passing through CMS and the federal government. So we've just negotiated the final little details, and hopefully those checks will start coming in to us because we needed that financial sustainability. We agreed to that. And so the title of this conference, this summit that all of you are here for, is about reinvestment, and that was so cool to think about how our project might inspire some thinking about this. We have reinvested county dollars into this project, and we sold that to our elected officials, saying we know that there's a good chance that we're going to save some money, but we want to reinvest that in services.
And so that was part of our agreement. And so these examples that I'm going to quickly share with you may not apply here in this state, but there may be services or there may be savings that you could reinvest in a certain way in terms of prevention. And so this is a look at our detox costs by year in Minnesota. The county has to pay for detox. And because of our university and college mix and other population factors, Blue Earth County spends a lot of money in comparison to other counties in the state. And so since the Yellow Line Project has been operational, and we actually never targeted detox services, we're down about $100,000 a year, which is significant in terms of a county of our size. And it's holding steady. And so we're reinvesting that money. And the same goes for chemical health treatment, although it's the inverse of it. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to invest in services. So chemical health treatment costs have actually gone up slightly. And you know what? I think that's good because focusing on investing in treatment versus buying time is something I'd rather do. I would rather do that than have the person just buy time sitting in a jail cell. And then lastly, in Minnesota, the counties pay for a certain portion of all state hospital costs for serious and persistent mentally ill adults who are civilly committed. And there were some policy changes over the last few years which made the county contribution go extremely high. Now, our anticipated budgets after these policy changes were made were $375,000 a year. Because we're getting so far upstream, we're meeting with people at the moment that they come into contact with law enforcement. We're engaging in their plan of care. We have dropped our spending tremendously, and it is staying flat. And so these pieces of our project are being replicated all over the state of Minnesota. And I understand that the policy changes in Minnesota are one thing, and they may or may not apply here, but I think that you can think of ways where you may have some opportunities as well. Finally, this is who we are. This is our contact information. Feel free to reach out to us. Thank you to the Commission for inviting us, and thank you to all the attendees for listening to us and sharing our story. This diversion work that we do, it's hard, but each diversion itself is worth it. Each connection to services matters. We will be having a breakout session this afternoon. We invite you to join us. We're going to be going through 8 core concepts, and we hope for it to be a little bit more of an intimate conversation with all of you where we can talk about how our learnings may be shared to you and about your projects or what you might be thinking, and then we'll have some time for question and answer as well. I just want to end with a number of years ago, I remember being part of a conversation, and this is not Matt behind me, that at the time was one of the commanders that made a statement. He said, you know, if human services would just get your people off our street, we would do much better, right? And likewise, I remember a case manager, an adult mental health case manager, coming and saying to me, Angie, I have a client that I work with, he ended up in jail, can I go see him? He's in jail. And at the time, our philosophies were really about self-empowerment and all of that, and I said, you know what, when he gets out of jail, he can come and see you. So he can be self-directed to come and see you. And she kind of said, oh, okay. I can't believe that I said that. Standing here today, I can't believe that I said that. Together, working together, we are getting people in their homes, not just off the street, but we're getting them connected to services. And so now I say, yes, go see them when they're in jail. That is the time to go see them. Let's get them out and let's get them connected to services. So thank you very much, and we hope to see you this afternoon, and enjoy the rest of your day.